"You're not fit to raise her." That's what he said right in front of our daughter. I stood there, heart shattered, but my mouth stayed silent. No arguing, no begging, because I knew I had already filed first, and in my hands was the evidence he never thought I kept: dash cam footage, deleted messages he forgot to erase, and a sworn statement from the woman he swore never existed. In court, I didn't need to scream to win my child back. I just needed to show the truth. My name is Melissa Grady. I live in Tempe, Arizona, and for 5 years, I thought I had the perfect little family: a husband who wore a uniform, a daughter with dimples and curls, a house with a swing set in the backyard and crayon drawings on the fridge. But a swing doesn't make a marriage, and a uniform doesn't make a man good. His name is Jake Grady. Everyone in our neighborhood loved him. He was a firefighter, strong, smiling, always the first to show up at a block party. He'd lift our daughter on his shoulders and wave to the other parents like he was Dad of the Year. But what they didn't see was what happened when the front door closed. Jake didn't like crying, especially not baby crying. So when I had postpartum depression and our daughter woke up at 2 a.m. screaming, he'd roll over, pull the blanket, and say, "She's your problem? Melissa, you're the one who wanted this." I'd sit on the floor beside the crib, barely able to keep my eyes open, while he slept soundly in the next room. And then, by morning, he'd smile, make pancakes, and post a picture online like nothing happened. That was Jake. Sunshine on the outside, thunder behind closed doors. Still, I stayed, because I believed in marriage, because I didn't want my daughter to grow up without a dad, because I told myself he's not violent, he's just tired. But then came the school pickup. One afternoon, our daughter waited on the curb for 40 minutes. Jake forgot. He said he was at the gym, but the gym doesn't have red lipstick and perfume samples. That was the first time she cried and said, "Why didn't Daddy come get me?" And I had no answer. I started writing things down after that. Little things, like the days he drank 3 beers before noon, the times he left the stove on and forgot, the time he yelled so loud, the neighbor knocked to ask if everything was okay. I didn't confront him. Not yet. But I was building something stronger than rage. One day, I found a message on his phone from a woman named C. She called him baby, sent him pictures. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his phone. I just took screenshots, saved them, printed them, labeled them. I went to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I needed someone to help me stay sharp, focused, calm. The therapist wrote a statement about my parenting, my stability, my commitment to my daughter. That would matter later, but I didn't know how much. And then one night, I asked Jake calmly if we could talk. About separation, about custody, about being fair. He laughed, right in my face, and said, "If you want to leave, go ahead. But you're not taking my daughter. You're unstable. Melissa, I'll get full custody. Easy." That was the moment. Not when he forgot pickup, not when he screamed, but when he said "my daughter" as if she was a trophy. I stood up, packed one small bag, and the next morning I filed first. Custody, separation, emergency petition, everything. And I filed it with everything I'd collected, every piece of paper, photo, recording. Because I wasn't just leaving. I was preparing to win. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after you file first. Not the kind of silence that's peaceful, but the kind that hums in your bones, like the quiet before a storm. Jake didn't call me that day, didn't text, didn't rage. He just vanished. And for 2 days, it stayed that way. Until the paperwork hit his mailbox. That's when he showed up. At my sister's place, where I'd been staying with my daughter, Ava. He pounded on the door like a cop, yelling my name like we were in some trashy drama. But I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. I just called my lawyer, who called the police. Jake got served that night, right there in the driveway. He looked stunned, like he never imagined a woman like me would have the guts. But guts had nothing to do with it. It was love. Love for a child who deserved more than a father who only showed up when it was convenient. The custody battle began within a week. Jake filed his own response asking for full custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable, erratic, and unfit. He even dug up that one ER visit from 3 years ago, when I had a panic attack after Ava had a fever spike. He spun it into a breakdown. My lawyer called it what it was, maternal concern. Jake's team sent subpoenas to my therapist. They requested my medication history. He tried to paint me as the villain in a story he wrote himself. But I didn't flinch, because for every claim he made, I had proof, cold, hard, documented. I had the school drop-off logs showing how many times he missed pickup. I had voice memos, his yelling, his drunken slurs. I had a statement from our pediatrician who said, point blank, Melissa is the parent who shows up. But still, there was a night when it all felt too heavy. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, watching Ava sleep through the cracked door. And I thought, what if they believe him? What if one sentence, one lie, ruins everything I've fought for? But then I remembered something. The night Ava had that stomach bug, and Jake was out watching the game. She couldn't stop throwing up. I held her for 6 hours straight, changed 6 sets of sheets, held cold cloths to her head. And at 4 a.m., she looked up and whispered, "Thank you for always being here, Mama." That was my truth, and it mattered more than any lie Jake could manufacture. When our first hearing arrived, I wore a plain navy dress, no makeup, no jewelry, just a copy of every file I'd spent months building. Jake showed up with a flashy lawyer and a smug grin. He nodded at me like this was some game he already knew he'd won. But I didn't play games. I spoke softly, clearly. I answered the judge's questions with facts, not feelings, not drama. And when Jake took the stand, he overplayed, called me delusional, needy, even paranoid. His voice rose, his tone shifted, and then he slipped, said something about needing control over Ava's schedule. Control. That word changed everything. The judge narrowed her eyes, asked follow-up questions, asked about his work schedule. He didn't have answers, because the truth is he didn't want custody. He wanted leverage. The judge ordered a temporary arrangement. Ava would stay with me, pending evaluation. Jake would get supervised visits 2 hours, twice a week. When the bailiff said court was adjourned, Jake glared at me, like I had stolen something from him. But I hadn't. I was reclaiming something that should have never been threatened. Outside, my hands shook, not from fear, but from release. I had survived the first battle, and there were more to come. But that day, that win, it tasted like justice. But Jake wasn't done. Of course he wasn't. When the supervised visits began, he played the doting father, brought toys, brought snacks, brought fake smiles. The social worker noted his punctuality, but also noted Ava's hesitation. She didn't run to him. She didn't call him daddy. She sat stiffly on the edge of her seat, answering his questions with single words. After one visit, she told me quietly, "He keeps asking me if you cry when I'm gone." My blood ran cold. Manipulation, even in small doses, leaves deep bruises. I logged every incident, every strange comment, every shift in Ava's mood after the visits. Meanwhile, Jake's lawyer tried a new tactic, calling into question my finances. They asked for bank records, rent agreements, daycare receipts, tried to suggest I couldn't afford to care for Ava alone. They didn't expect me to be prepared. I had every receipt filed. I had support from my employer. I had a clean, consistent routine. But more than that, I had something Jake didn't: time invested, bath time, bedtime stories, doctor appointments, teacher conferences, the things that don't show up on paper but show up in a child's eyes. The final evaluation came after 2 months. A court-appointed guardian sat down with Ava. They spoke privately, and I wasn't allowed in. But I remember the guardian's face when she left that room. Soft, serious, changed. She asked me if Ava had ever mentioned nightmares. I nodded. Only when she knows she's seeing him the next day. And then 2 weeks later, I got the letter. A recommendation full custody awarded to me. Supervised visitation indefinitely. They said Ava expressed fear and emotional withdrawal around her father, that she clearly identifies her mother as her primary emotional support. I held that paper and just breathed. It wasn't over yet. There would be a final hearing, but I knew in my gut I had done everything right. Jake didn't look me in the eye at the final custody hearing. Not once. His lawyer spoke for him, tried one last time to argue for shared custody, but the judge didn't budge. She said, "Mr. Grady, parenting is more than presence. It is consistency, safety, and stability. And based on all evidence presented, Miss Grady has provided that, and more." The gavel fell, and just like that, the war was over. I walked out with Ava holding my hand, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, like I could breathe again, like I had stepped out of shadow into something real and bright. My daughter looked up at me and said, "Do we go home now?" And I said, "Well, yes, baby, this time we're really going home." Winning custody wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of learning how to live without fear, of showing my daughter what safety really feels like. The first week after the ruling, Ava started sleeping through the night. No more whimpers, no more calling out for me every hour. She started humming while brushing her teeth. She started asking questions again, laughing at cartoons. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it tiptoes in on the quiet hum of a child feeling safe. But Jake wasn't done. Of course he wasn't. When the judge gave him supervised visitation, he acted like it was beneath him. For 3 weeks, he skipped every session. His lawyer called mine, blaming scheduling conflicts and emotional strain, but I knew what it was. Control. If he couldn't win, he'd rather disappear. I didn't chase him. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't explain anything to Ava except the truth. In words, her little heart could carry Daddy's figuring some things out right now. But I'm here. Always. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. Not just routines and savings accounts, but my confidence, my identity. I picked up more hours at the dental clinic where I worked. My boss, Ms. Dorsey, gave me a quiet nod the day I returned after court. Didn't pry. Just placed a coffee beside me and said, "Some victories aren't loud, Melissa, but they echo." Ava turned 6 that summer. We had a backyard picnic with paper lanterns and chocolate cupcakes. My sister brought music. My mother came early and stayed late. And when Ava blew out her candles, she looked at me and said, "This is the best day ever, Mama." I cried that night, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I was crying from joy. Jake resurfaced in September, sent an email asking to resume visits. No apology, no accountability, just cold sentences typed from a distance. My lawyer responded with the protocol he'd have to go through family services again. He didn't like that. Filed a motion to appeal the visitation terms. So, we went back to court. Round 2. But this time, I wasn't shaking. This time, I knew exactly who I was, and exactly what I was protecting. Jake argued he had a new job, a new place, claimed to be sober. He wore a clean shirt and spoke softer, but the judge wasn't swayed by clean collars. She asked about therapy, parenting classes, consistency. He had excuses. I had documents. I showed Ava's journal entries, her teacher's letters, the report from family services. It was clear as day. He wanted control, not connection, and the court saw it too. Jake's appeal was denied. Supervised visitation would continue, this time with a court-assigned monitor. And if he skipped again, visitation rights could be revoked permanently. He looked at me as they read the ruling, but I didn't meet his eyes, because I wasn't here for him. I was here for the little girl holding a stuffed bear in the waiting room. 2 weeks later, Jake showed up for his first monitored visit. I watched from the hallway, through a one-way mirror. He brought coloring books, tried to laugh. Ava didn't flinch, but she also didn't smile. She sat down, listened, talked a little, and when the hour ended, she walked out and said to me, "Can we go get pancakes now?" No tears, no begging, just pancakes. That's when I knew she was healing. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering without fear. It means holding your ground even when the past tries to knock again. And as for me, I stopped waiting for closure. Because I realized sometimes the greatest revenge is raising your child in peace, without their chaos, without their shadow, without needing to prove anything to anyone except the child watching you, learning what love looks like. In the months that followed, Ava and I built a life with no trace of his shadow. We started a weekend ritual every Saturday morning. We'd walk to the farmer's market near Tempe Town Lake. She'd pick sunflowers, I'd get us peach muffins, and we'd sit on a bench, talking about everything and nothing. Those small moments, they were more powerful than any courtroom ruling, because they were ours. Jake sent a few more emails. Formal, measured, like a man trying to tick boxes. But Ava had stopped asking about him. She had a new dance teacher she adored. She'd started drawing family pictures with just me, Grandma, and our dog Ruby. No empty space, no missing figure. One night, she crawled into my bed after a thunderstorm. I was half asleep when she whispered, "You're my safe place, Mama." And just like that, all the scars, the sleepless nights, the court dates, the panic attacks, they folded into silence. Because I had given her something no court could order: stability, consistency, unshakable love. I started writing again, not in journals hidden in drawers, but publicly, a blog for single mothers. I told my story, one post at a time, and the messages started coming. Women in Texas, in Ohio, in New Jersey. Women who said I thought I was crazy, but you made me feel seen. There's a power in telling the truth, not to shame, not to seek revenge, but to show someone else the path. And maybe that's what this whole journey gave me. A voice, not the loud kind, not the one that shouts back in court, but the kind that speaks from scars, and still chooses softness. Ava's 7th birthday came around. We had a small group over, just the people who'd stood by us. We lit candles, sang a little off-key, and she blew out the flames with the biggest grin. Later, I asked her what she wished for. She smiled, hugged me, and said nothing. I already got it. That night, I sat by her bedside, brushing her hair behind her ear, and I made myself a promise that I would never again shrink to keep the peace, never again doubt what I know in my bones, and never, ever let fear speak louder than love. There's a quiet power in living without looking over your shoulder. But peace isn't something you win once and keep forever. You protect it. You guard it. Every single day. After Jake's second appeal was denied, I thought maybe he'll finally let go. Maybe now. He'll see Ava isn't a pawn. That this isn't about winning. That she's a child. But narcissists don't grieve the loss of people. They grieve the loss of control. 3 weeks later, I got a knock at the door. It was a man in khakis and a clipboard, from Child Protective Services. He said there had been an anonymous report of emotional neglect, that I was allegedly isolating Ava. I knew immediately where it came from. Jake. The caseworker was kind, professional. He walked through our home, checked Ava's room, looked at the fridge covered in her drawings. He watched her dance in the living room, tell him about her favorite teacher, and he smiled. 2 days later, the case was closed as unsubstantiated. Still, it rattled me, because even when he wasn't present, Jake found ways to haunt us. I talked to my lawyer again. She advised me to document every interaction, even the silence, even the absence. So I did. I made copies of every no-show, every missed birthday, every unresponded email from the visitation monitor. If he was going to try and build a narrative, I would build the truth. But more importantly, I focused on Ava. We started going to mother-daughter therapy, not because we were broken, but because we were healing, together. One day, Ava asked me something that caught me off guard. She said, "Mama, does Daddy still love me?" And I froze. Because how do you tell a child that love shouldn't hurt? So I knelt beside her, held her hands, and said, "Sweetheart, I think your daddy loves you in the only way he knows how. But sometimes people don't know how to love in a way that makes us feel safe. And that's not your fault." She nodded slowly, didn't ask again. That night, I wrote that moment down, word for word, and because years from now, I want her to see it, to remember, not my bitterness, but my honesty. Winter came. Ava got the lead in her school play. She was a little snowflake, glittery and nervous and perfect. I sat in the front row, heart pounding with pride. And then he showed up. Jake, standing in the back, arms folded, no camera, no flowers, just there. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even move. He had every right to attend public school events, but I could feel my breath shorten. My hand gripped the seat. Ava didn't notice him. She only looked at me when she stepped on stage, and when she waved, it was in my direction. Afterward, he didn't approach us, didn't say hello, just watched, then left before the applause ended. I added it to the file, a paragraph labeled "Presence without participation." The next week, he tried to file again, this time for joint legal custody. He claimed I was making educational decisions without him, claimed he wanted to be involved. So we went back. Courtroom. Sworn statements. More time. More money. This time, the judge didn't even need a full hearing. She reviewed the record, looked at his history of non-attendance, missed visits, CPS complaint, and she said, plain and clear, "Mr. Grady, the court will not grant rights to a parent who has consistently failed to exercise the ones already given." Motion denied. I walked out of that courtroom tired, but resolute, because I realized something. This wasn't just about Ava. It was about every woman who's ever been told she's overreacting. Every mother forced to defend what she already does every day show up. I joined a support group for single moms. We met in a library basement every Tuesday, shared stories over donated coffee and paper cups. Some were fresh in the battle, some had scars decades old, but all of us knew that pain, the kind that comes when you love a child more fiercely than you ever loved yourself. It changed me. Because even though I'd won every hearing, every motion, every fight, there was still a girl inside me who once believed she wasn't enough. And every time Ava smiled at me, every time she reached for my hand, that girl healed a little more. Healing isn't a moment, it's 1,000 choices. To stay calm, to stay grounded, to stay kind when you want to scream. And that's what I did. One day, one hearing, one bedtime story at a time. That spring, something shifted in me. Not dramatically, not like fireworks, but quietly, like a muscle that had stopped twitching. Like the first night I fell asleep and didn't dream of courtrooms. Ava started drawing again. Her pictures were brighter, fuller. She drew herself standing in fields of tulips, beside a house that always had a heart in the window, and in every picture I was there, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes holding the sun, always smiling. She didn't draw him, not once. One afternoon, she came home with a Mother's Day poem, handwritten in crooked lines and glitter glue. It said, "You're my hero. You're my son. You're the one who makes life fun. You give hugs and food and light. You're my mom, and you're just right." I hung it on the fridge, and every time I walked by, it reminded me of why I fought so hard. Not for court documents, but for this joy, this quiet, this ordinary magic. And eventually, Jake's noise faded. There were no more filings, no more letters, no more surprise show-ups or cold, formal emails. Whether it was fatigue, shame, or just apathy, I never knew. But it didn't matter. What mattered was this. My daughter had a home, a real one. Not just 4 walls and a roof, but a place where she felt seen, heard, and whole. Years later, I still keep a binder on my bookshelf. labeled custody, full case. It's thick, heavy, full of ink and statements and shadows, and I haven't opened it in years. But I keep it, not out of fear, but as a reminder of everything I overcame, everything we rebuilt, everything I protected, by choosing not to stay silent. Victory is never loud. It doesn't come with applause or streamers. Sometimes, it arrives in whispers, in the sound of a child laughing in her sleep, in the silence between court dates, in the way no one knocks on your door just to shake your world anymore. It's been 3 years. 3 years since the final custody ruling, since the last courtroom, the last filing, the last time Jake tried to make noise. 3 years of waking up without dread sitting on my chest. Ava's older now, wiser. She asks sharper questions. She reads emotions in a room faster than most adults. Children who've had to grow up with tension in the walls. They learn that early. But she's not jaded, she's not broken, she's brave and soft and wildly, beautifully whole. We've built a life that doesn't revolve around what he does or doesn't do. Ava dances now, tap and ballet. I sit in the front row at every recital with flowers in hand and tears in my eyes. Not because I'm sad, but because I remember what it took to get here. I've started speaking publicly, not just blogging actual events, church basements, women's shelters, conferences for family law, and every time I stand behind a microphone, I start with this: my name is Melissa Grady, and 3 years ago, I was told I wasn't stable enough to raise my child. The room always goes still, because they know what's coming next. The twist, the fight, the quiet revenge of showing up again and again until no one could deny my presence. I talk about what custody really means, that it's not about control, it's about capacity. The capacity to show up, every day, to stay calm under pressure, to love without manipulating, to prioritize a child's needs over your pride. Women approach me afterward with tears in their eyes. Not because they're sad, but because for once, someone stood where they're standing and made it to the other side. Sometimes Ava comes with me. She brings a book, sits quietly in the front row, and when I finish speaking, she runs up and hugs me. That hug, it says more than any closing argument ever could. Last summer, Jake tried to send her a letter. No envelope, no return address, just slipped into the school's main office with her name written in rushed cursive. The principal gave it to me. I read it first. It wasn't dangerous. Just empty. A few lines of guilt, a few awkward jokes, nothing about her hobbies, nothing about who she'd become. I gave Ava the choice. I told her, you can read it, or you don't have to. You're allowed to decide. She looked at the letter for a long time, then slid it back across the table and said, "He's still trying to talk at me, not with me." She was 9. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry, if I still hate him, and I don't know how to answer that easily. Because it's not about hate. It's about harm. And the way some people walk into your life like hurricanes, then act shocked when you rebuild without them. Jake will always be a part of her story, but he won't write the ending. That belongs to her. And to me, the mother who filed first, who didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't run, just stood her ground and said no more. Sometimes justice is poetic. Sometimes it's a series of mundane choices, choosing peace over retaliation, documentation over desperation, letting go instead of lashing out. We celebrated Ava's 10th birthday last month, double digits. She wanted a power party, her words. She wore a cape and glittery sneakers, invited every girl in her class, and stood on a chair to give a speech. She said, "I'm 10 now, and that means I can do anything, because I'm powerful, like my mom." I didn't cry right then, but I did when I tucked her into bed later that night, because the court gave me custody. But what she gave me was belief, in myself, in second chances, in the quiet strength of women who refuse to break. So if you're listening to this, and you're in the middle of your fight, hear me. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be tired. But it's not okay to forget who you are. You are not the names they called you in court. You are not the labels in someone's false affidavit. You are not broken. You are building. And every brick you lay in love lasts longer than the damage they tried to leave behind. This isn't just my story. It's the story of thousands of women silent in courtrooms, strong in kitchens, sleepless at 3 a.m. with worry. It's the story of resilience that doesn't make headlines, of mothers who memorize custody laws better than their favorite books, of those who smile through school pickups while their hearts still carry battle scars. I didn't win because I was lucky. I won because I refused to be erased, because I chose strategy over screaming, because I documented everything, even when it hurt. There were days I thought I'd lose, that the system would choose the man with the deeper voice and calmer tone. But I held on to one truth. Consistency doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just shows up, again and again. Ava's favorite book right now is about wolves. One night, she pointed to the mother wolf and said, "She's the one who watches the den." And I nodded, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "So am I." Because I am the watcher, the shield, the quiet protector who once sat in a courtroom and listened to lies, then rose, calmly, with the truth. Jake hasn't tried to contact her again. Not in over a year. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he hasn't. But it's not my job to wonder anymore. My job is to raise a girl who knows her worth, who never mistakes silence for weakness or volume for strength. When Ava turns 13, I'll tell her the full story. Not because I want her to hate him, but because I want her to understand what love is not. Love is not court-ordered. Love is not inconsistent or conditional or manipulative. Love shows up. And so did I.